In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to drape a 4-dart sloper. A sloper is the term used for a basic bodice, skirt, sleeve, or pants pattern from which all designs are developed in flat patterning. The slopers are also called master patterns, block patterns, or foundation patterns. This is a 4-dart sloper for a bodice, which is the upper part of the torso, and the 4 darts are the front waist, the front shoulder, and then the back shoulder and the back waist. We call it a 4-dart sloper because we develop patterns on the half. We develop a pattern half of the front and then half of the back. So within that half we have 1, 2, 3, 4 darts. That's a 4-dart sloper. First, take a look at your mannequin and make sure that it is symmetrical. Sometimes when they fall over, they get mashed in either on a shoulder or a breast or a hip. You want to make sure, just be aware of what shape your mannequin is in. Next, this twill tape I'm placing across the apex, one apex to the other. That's to bridge the gap. We're going to be draping across the front, and we don't want our fabric drape to fall into the cleavage. Mannequins are made with linen and slight padding over a cardboard cover, cardboard base underneath. And so you'll find that you need to place your pins in, sliding them under the skin. You don't want to have your tip of the sharp tip of your pin coming out. That invites wounded fingers when you're draping. So make sure the tip of the pin is anchored underneath the skin so that you don't hurt yourself. To begin draping the 4-dart sloper, we need to measure for the size of muslin we need. Start at the side of the neck here at the shoulder, to the apex, to the waist, and then add 5 inches. That's how long you need to snip and tear your muslin. How wide is measured from the side seam over the apex to the center front. Add 5 inches, snip and tear. To measure for the back muslin, measure from the side seam at the neck down to the waist, add 5 inches. Measure from the center back across the shoulder blade area to the side seam, add 5 inches, and that's how big the muslin needs to be cut for the back. We order muslin on 100-yard rolls, and this is how you manage to wrestle this 100-pound gorilla to get the piece of muslin you need. Measure along the selvage the length that you need, snip the selvage, tear, and this is enough muslin to do your project. Next, you want to make sure that your piece of muslin is blocked in a square way. This is where the Taylor square or the L square comes in handy. We know that this is on grain because we snipped and tore this edge, and it always tears on grain. So I'm going to run this ruler along that grain line, and we can see that this is not on grain, that the muslin has been torqued, pulled off grain by this 1/2 inch. So what you want to do is take this to the ironing board, or to steam it and heat it up, and then to pull it in the opposite way to see if you can square up this piece of muslin. When you're blocking, you'll want to iron out all of the creases that have been introduced into the muslin while it's been manufactured and on the roll. You don't want to drape with wrinkled muslin. It will add distortions into your final pattern. On the front piece of muslin, mark a 1-inch seam on one long edge of the muslin, and then halfway down the muslin, mark a cross grain line. This is what you mark on the front. 1 inch down one long side and a cross grain line halfway down. On the back muslin, do the same marking of 1 inch straight down from the, or straight across from the raw edge here, and then 1/3 of the way down, mark a cross grain line. So on the front, you're marking a cross grain line halfway down. On the back, you're marking a cross grain line 1/3 of the way down. Press under this 1 inch seam allowance on the front and on the back. To drape the front of the 4-dart sloper, align the pressed under seam allowance with center front, keeping the horizontal line at the center of the apex bust level line. You don't have to, in fact don't, sink your pins all the way in. That's too much work because you're going to be pulling them out, taking them in, putting them in, taking them out, doing all that. And you don't want to set up a system of putting pins in that it makes you work. You see how this bridge is helping hold this out. So we've established the center front. Next, starting at the top, you want to clip to within, 1/4 of an inch of the seam line under here. We're going to go at it in increments. You don't want to clip too far too fast because then you'll have to start over. So what we're doing is clipping and draping around that neckline to the shoulder seam. Pretty soon these floppy bits are going to irritate you and get in the way. You can just cut them off down to that. And then pulling the muslin toward you so that you're not clipping into the linen of the dress form. Just clip a little more here. Being very careful when you're clipping around pins to not clip through them. That's a surefire way of dulling your scissors. We've established the neck. So smooth the material across this chest area to find the princess seam. That's here. We're going to drape in the shoulder dart so as to keep this bust level line, keep it level. So when we drape in the shoulder dart, we don't want this to be here, that's not level. We don't want to over drape. We want to keep it level, meaning parallel with the floor. I'm putting a pin there at the side seam here. You can feel the bumps of the side seam through the muslin, and that's very handy. We want to drape up and around the arm's eye, which is this ridge here. I tend to drape and mark an arm's eye that's about 1 inch below the arm's eye plate here and then blend up to that. I find that that fits pretty well. Here we're going to snip away the excess in the arm's eye and clip again almost up to the arm's eye seam. We're going to find the shoulder seam here and put a pin. So what we've done is we've kept on grain at the front, we've kept on grain horizontally at the bust level line, we've draped our neck, we've draped our arm's eye, and so now we've isolated the amount that the drape that needs to go into the dart underlay. The dart underlay gets pressed toward the center, so I'm pushing that extra fabric toward the center. I'm seeing a little bit of a drag line here. I'm releasing that and smoothing it out. I got a little exuberant in pushing fabric that way. And I'm wanting to check to see that my dart is truly on the princess line, and it is. So I'm going to pin that down. Now, darts need to point toward the apex, but they want to be stitched 1 inch to stop 1 inch away. So the termination point of the dart, the termination point is 1 inch away from the apex. So we want to just drape that in. What I'm doing right here is a very controversial thing. because I'm right-handed and I'm draping on this side, I want to put that pin in with the point going up. People will tell you that's very, very dangerous. They're probably right. You might be told in other classes, ouch, to put the pin with the point going down. It's just how your hands work and what your awareness is about it. So moving on to the waist, which nips in and then flares out over the hip. That's a complex curve there. And here again, we're going to want to clip up almost to it so that the fabric has room. You see, if we smooth that, the fabric needs to open and drape around the garment, or the mannequin. So smooth over, find your princess line here at the waist, pin that, smooth down, find the side seam and waist intersection. And do you notice, I have been pinning in what I call pin in opposition. So this pinning wants to be very smooth this way, and I want to pin this so that the fabric can't ease back over. So I have pinned in this position. Notice if I pin like that, the fabric could slide over. If this was pinned like this pinned this way, the fabric could slide over, and then we won't have the fit that we want. So I am pinning in a way that keeps the fabric from sliding around. I call that pinning in opposition. So I found the side seam here. I'm going to clip so that the fabric can spread over the hip. You see how that works. And then this is the amount of fabric that we want to drape into the side front princess dart down here. And sometimes this is a little tricky and you have to manipulate your fabric in order to. And you see how this is buckling right here? That is telling me that it needs, yes, it needs to be clipped and released. Here again is an opportunity to be very careful that you don't clip through the waist tape. That's a surefire way of pissing off the shop supervisors. Here again, here's the apex, and I want this dart to stop an inch away from that apex, so I'm forcing that to be draped like that. We can always true this. In the next step, we'll be truing this into a paper pattern. We can always finesse the termination point of the dart in the paper pattern. Before we go too much further, we want to mark some of these with pencil. Here again, don't use a Sharpie, it will bleed through onto your mannequin. You want to mark the neckline, the shoulder seam, which you can feel through here, through the muslin, you can feel that. Mark the arm's eye, and here again, I like to go down about an inch and then blend that up. Here's my side seam. When you're marking the waist tape, pick a spot. Either be consistent with marking the top, the middle, or the bottom of your waist tape. It doesn't matter, just pick one. Probably you'll pick one according to the client's measurements, the actor or client that you're doing this for. So I've marked the waist, the side, the arm's eye, the shoulder, and the neck. Next we're going to drape the back. We're going to need to access the shoulder and the side seam, and so I like to peel that back, get it out of my way, this way, and next we'll drape the back. To drape the back, again, the edge that you've pressed under goes along center back, making sure to leave enough here at the top so that you can reach around the neck to the shoulder seam. This is the horizontal level line that we're going to be putting over the apex, which is the shoulder blade area. Here again, I'm going to be pulling and smoothing the fabric that way, so I'm pinning in opposition, pinning so that that won't, the muslin that is, won't slide. So we'll go all the way down to the back. Here again, we're going to clip pull the fabric away from the mannequin and clip almost to where the neckline looks like it wants to be. Finish that clipping so that it drapes and falls nicely. There we go. And finding the shoulder seam. So here again, of course, the front has the breast and the back apex is the shoulder blade. So it's the level line is starting to go down, but not as significantly as on the front. We want to make sure to smooth that over and isolate, keeping that level, smoothing that up to the shoulder line. And what that does, again, is tells us how deep the shoulder dart wants to be. I'm going to get rid of some of that excess just because. We'll deal with all this later. I'm going to snip into here, being careful not to try to cut through your pins. Smoothing from the neck over to the princess seam. Mark that. Darts get pressed toward center, so we're going to fold that excess toward the center. Pinning that in. Again, I got a little exuberant. There are some drag lines here. I'm going to release that. Generally speaking, these darts are about a ½ inch deep and about 3 inches down to the point. That changes depending on the size and shape of your mannequin. I'm going to smooth this over to the side seam, an inch below where that plate is. I'm going to clip away this excess, snip into the curve so that it can spread around that curve, that arm's eye curve. I'm going to smooth down to the waist at the side seam. Here again, you can see this is buckling, so we need to snip up, being careful not to snip through the waist tape. Don't snip too far. And smoothing over from the center back to the side back seam, princess seam. We can find where the side back dart wants to be. And here again, there's some buckling. That is indicating we need to clip a little further so that this can smooth in. Do you see how there's a diagonal drag line there? That's sort of telling us that it really wants to be smoothed over that direction, which eliminates that. Unlike the front with the breast, the shoulder blade area doesn't really have a specific apex on it. You want so where do you put the tip termination point of your side back dart? It wants to be, if your shoulder blade area is around in here, it wants to stop about an inch away from that area. It certainly doesn't extend past your arm's eye. In fact, it should stop about here. And again, this is truing into the paper. We can modify this. Next, you want to mark the neck, the shoulder here, the edge of the shoulder here, that 1 inch down, blending up, side seam. You don't have to draw the perfect straight side seam, because when we true into the paper pattern, we'll use the ruler. A ruler gets you a much better straight lined than any freehand on the dress form. I'm marking where the fold of the dart folds over. I'm not trying again to mark the whole thing, because we're going to be marking that with a ruler, and we'll get a far more accurate line at that point. So we have the neck, the shoulder dart, the arm's eye, side seam, waist, side back dart. And then it's time to see if it matches up with the front. I'm going to get rid of some of this excess seam allowance, on the front, and I'm going to smooth the two sides up to see if the front dart matches up with the back dart. That's critical. And I'm going to pin through all the layers, front to the back, back to the front, to make sure that my shoulder seams are matching up nicely. I want to make sure that my arm's eye is coming up on the front, transitioning beautifully into the back, and there's an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch off, so I'm going to do that. And that again is something we can true in the paper pattern. Checking how the neck on the front blends in, oh yeah, beautifully. The neck on the back, the shoulder seams match up, terrific. Same process on the side seams, making sure that the front matches the back at the side seam, that the arm's eye blends beautifully from the front to the back, making sure the waist blends from front to back as well. This is a draped 4-dart sloper. In the next video, I'll show you how to true it into a paper pattern.